So I'm Emily Underwood. I'm the director of the Innovation Clinic. And in the Innovation Clinic, we represent high growth startups or tech-enabled smaller businesses, depending, and venture capital firms. So our high growth startups really come from a lot of different places. So some of them are Booth and Law School founders. Some of them are from the university more broadly. So we work with a lot of like the biological sciences and physical sciences faculty who are commercializing tech that they developed at the university, but also clients that come to us from word of mouth. We also work with venture capital firms. Sometimes they're just sending us some of their portfolio clients and then they're kind of involved in the representation from there. Other times we're doing work directly for them. So we wouldn't work with, for example, like a big Fortune 500 company. We also wouldn't work with like a small business that's not planning to scale, for example, like a local restaurant or something like that. We do transactional and regulatory work for those clients, which I'll talk about in a moment, so no litigation. And then we have a seminar component like all the other clinics where you meet with me for 2 hours a week, and I'll talk about what we do in seminar as well. So in terms of our transactional work, we do a lot. What I tell clients when I onboard them, when they're thinking about what kinds of things that they might want the Innovation Clinic to help with, is that if a startup needs it and it's transactional work, we probably do it. So the slide has a bunch of examples. All of these things, except for M&A, are things that we worked on this year. If you're in the clinic, you probably wouldn't get the opportunity to work on each and every one of these things. That would be really hard given the time constraints that you have. And it's kind of subject to availability, like what the clients are asking us to do in a particular year. But this gives you the sense really of the breadth of transactional work that you might get to work on. Our regulatory work is much more niche, and we're kind of one of the only clinics in the country that does this particular kind of regulatory work. In our regulatory work, we focus on a specific type of question, which is, I'm a really disruptive, innovative company that's doing something that no one's ever done before, but I think that there's regulatory barriers or laws that might prevent me from bringing this to market. How do I think about that, and what do I do? So we wouldn't help, for example, any old company figure out, how to comply with data privacy laws, because those are really well understood in the market. There's very little about your business model that could make data privacy laws apply differently to you. Similarly, like we wouldn't help a medical device or a new drug figure out how to navigate their way through FDA approval processes. Like, again, that's something that's really well understood in the market. Tons of lawyers that are really good at it and experts at it. There's not much value we can add to industry by helping out with those kinds of issues. However, if you're a 3D printing company who has materials and processes that you use to build single family homes in under 24 hours, but the building codes in every single city in the country don't allow you to do that, you have a really idiosyncratic one-off problem that probably nobody has ever thought about before. And that's the kind of thing that we focus on. We're industry agnostic, so that is actually one example of a company that we have represented, but recently we've done work in sports, we've done work in climate tech, fintech, we've worked with an adoption platform, so we're kind of all over the place on this type of question, but we do focus on this very specific type of question. So if you're looking for a way to get exposure to administrative law issues, we often encounter those when we're doing this kind of work. We often have like Administrative Procedure Act claims, either at the state or federal level, trying to say that an executive branch agency might have exceeded the scope of authority that the legislature gave it when enacting certain rules that might prevent our clients from coming to market. We also have to do a lot of work trying to figure out what's going to be more beneficial to our clients, trying to get a law passed through the legislature, or whether we can just deal with what is often the path of least resistance, a much more efficient approach of going to the federal or state executive branch regulator. We often encounter federalism questions as well. Many times our clients come to us and they think that they are, and they correctly think, that they are regulated by both federal regulators and state regulators, and sometimes those rules are in conflict with one another. They don't know which rules to follow and what position they should take that would be beneficial to them. So we help them think through that as well. On our transactional work, the outcomes are pretty clear. It's the legal document or the contract that we negotiate on behalf of our client. That's usually what the work product looks like. Here it can be much more nebulous. Sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's a really long memo, sometimes it's a letter to a regulator and ongoing correspondence with them. Sometimes it relates to regulatory strategy or product rollout strategy. Other times we're helping them figure out how they might redesign their product to be compliant instead, if that's something that is possible. We also work on general regulatory issues that impact our industry broadly. When those come up, we'll submit comments. So for example, when the Corporate Transparency Act came out, we submitted a comment to FinCEN asking them to change a bunch of the rules that they promulgated under that act to make it easier for startups to comply, and they ended up accepting most of our suggestions. And then we also do some general thought leadership, publishing white papers in process in the AI space. So that's kind of the client work you're doing. In Seminar, there's a few different things that you'll do. I use Seminar to kind of round out the experience. So if I was going to present you to a law firm as having taken Startup Lawyer 101, what would I want to make sure you know? So lectures are structured much like your classes that you're probably already familiar with. You'll do some reading and then come to class and we'll have a discussion, not lecture typically, real discussion based on that reading. And then I'll have simulations and other exercises where you get to test out how well you've actually understood that. So for example, in the spring, I put the students in teams, some of them representing a venture capital firm, some of them representing a founder, and you're tasked with negotiating a Series A term sheet to test how well you've understood our discussion of Series A term sheets, but also your negotiation skills that we will have touched upon in a prior class. So that's kind of what we're doing in class. We also conduct case rounds. Most clinics do. This is an opportunity for you to talk about what you're working on, what's been hard, what you've learned, and get suggestions from your classmates. Again, not everyone will get exposure to everything that the clinic does throughout their time in the clinic. So this is a really good opportunity to cross-pollinate across different projects so that you get a little bit of a sense of what everybody's doing. And then finally, I bring in guest speakers. So these can be founders, these can be venture capitalists. Sometimes they're people who run like accelerator programs that we've helped set up to give you a sense of what's going on in industry. So just a couple of other things, to think about as it relates to the Innovation Clinic. So I'll talk a little bit at the end about how each clinic structures its credits and things like that, and what kind of work you have to do. For my clinic, I do require 2 minimum quarters consecutive commitment. So you can't like enroll in the fall and then drop at the end of the fall and come back in the spring. I need you for at least 2 back-to-back quarters. And then I currently have a 3/4 maximum, although I do make exceptions to that sometimes. Most people max out on their credits by the time they get to that point anyway. My key goals for you when you participate in this clinic are first, that you develop soft skills. This is something that you will, like a lot of people who do my clinic are ultimately going to go work at big law firms and do some sort of transactional practice. And you probably won't get a lot of opportunity to practice with your kind of client relationship skills until it's time for you to actually like use them for real, which is a bit daunting. So I hope that you gain the skills of project management, client expectation management, how to inspire confidence on behalf of your client, things like that. You're nearly always going to be in the driver's seat, leading all the client calls, and I'm kind of just there as moral support, so you get a lot of client contact. Hopefully you come away with generalizable transactional drafting negotiation skills. Whether you do an ECBC practice or not, what you learn in this clinic will be valuable to you for sure. And then of course, exposure to the tech and VC ecosystem. One feature of working with entrepreneurs that's kind of nice is they're very curious, and they often don't know what's going on, but they want to know. And so, you know, the test of whether you've actually learned something and understood it is how well you can explain it to someone else, and you'll get a lot of that kind of experience working with entrepreneurs in this clinic. Last couple things to note are that I let students pick whatever they want to work on from the list of available options that clients have sent to us. So that gives you a lot of flexibility to tailor the experience project by project to get exposure to kind of whatever different kind of projects that you want to work on, subject to availability, of course, from the clients. And then the last thing to note, I know a lot of people probably have questions about the TREC. That's a separate thing from the clinic, technically, but all Innovation Clinic students who participate next year or the following year would be eligible to go on the TREC if it happens again, which would be in spring break 26. And I'm happy to answer questions about the TREC separate from today's session because it's kind of separate from clinic. So that is the Innovation Clinic.